In Washington, D.C., the air was thick with anticipation and anxiety as the nation braced for a Supreme Court decision that would reverberate far beyond the marble steps of the courthouse. The justices were poised to deliver a landmark ruling, one that would not only redefine the boundaries of presidential power but also challenge the very core of Donald Trump's America First trade agenda, which had dominated headlines and policy debates for years. This moment was the culmination of a fierce and complex struggle, pitting the executive branch against Congress, American businesses against government policy, and the United States against its closest trading partners. Each side brought its own interests, fears, and hopes to the table. At the heart of the case was a fundamental question: how much authority should a single individual, the president, have to reshape the global economy, alter the flow of trillions of dollars, and impact the livelihoods of millions both at home and abroad? President Trump's aggressive use of tariffs as a tool of foreign policy had triggered a wave of global retaliation, igniting trade wars that affected everything from steel and soybeans to cars and consumer electronics. The policy divided Americans, sparking heated debates in Congress, boardrooms, and factory floors across the country. Now, the Supreme Court faced a pivotal decision. Were Trump's sweeping actions a legitimate exercise of executive authority granted by law, or did they represent an unprecedented overreach, sidestepping Congress and concentrating too much power in the hands of one office? Lawsuits poured in from American businesses, who argued that the tariffs amounted to massive unauthorized taxes that threatened their survival. Foreign governments joined the fray, contending that the president's actions violated international agreements and destabilized global markets. Billions of dollars in tariffs, the fate of countless jobs, and the very structure of America's trade relationships with the world now hung in the balance, as investors and workers alike watched nervously. Around the globe, journalists, policymakers, and world leaders watched every development, knowing that the court's decision would not only shape Trump's legacy, but also set a precedent for the powers of all future presidents to come. For American businesses, the case offered a glimmer of hope, an opportunity for relief from punishing tariffs, and a chance to return to stability and growth. For America's trading partners, it signaled the possibility of a shift in U.S. policy, and perhaps a return to more predictable, rules-based international commerce. As the gavel struck, it was clear: the Supreme Court's decision would forever alter the landscape of American trade policy, with consequences that would echo for generations. Trump's presidency was marked by an aggressive, unconventional approach to trade. He imposed sweeping tariffs on China and even U.S. allies, aiming to protect American industries and force new deals. The administration invoked rarely used laws like Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, citing national security to justify tariffs on steel and aluminum. Section 301 of the Trade Act allowed retaliation against unfair practices, fueling a trade war with China and sparking global uncertainty. These broad tariffs disrupted supply chains and angered allies who responded with their own duties. Trump's team argued these statutes gave the president wide discretion to protect U.S. interests, but this aggressive use of executive power, bypassing Congress, set the stage for a major legal showdown. The central question: had the president gone too far? Critics from across the political spectrum accused Trump of massive executive overreach. The Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the power to levy taxes and regulate foreign commerce. By imposing tariffs unilaterally, Trump was seen as bypassing Congress and undermining the separation of powers. The use of national security to justify tariffs on allies like Canada and the EU drew particular scorn. Many argued this stretched the law's intent, creating a dangerous precedent for future presidents. Businesses reported rising costs, layoffs, and retaliatory tariffs that hurt American farmers and manufacturers. Internationally, the WTO and U.S. allies condemned the tariffs as violations of trade agreements. America's global leadership was questioned as trade conflicts escalated. The backlash intensified pressure on the administration and fueled the legal fight. Opposition to Trump's tariffs quickly moved to the courts. American businesses and trade groups filed lawsuits, arguing the tariffs were unlawful taxes imposed without congressional approval. They claimed the administration exceeded its authority, especially by targeting allies under the guise of national security. Internationally, countries like Canada, Mexico, the EU, and China challenged the tariffs at the WTO, calling them violations of global trade rules. These legal battles questioned whether the president truly had such sweeping power over trade. Conflicting lower court rulings created uncertainty for businesses. Ultimately, the Supreme Court was called to decide the limits of presidential authority in trade. The Supreme Court's landmark ruling declared the president's tariff authority is not unlimited. While laws like Section 232 allow executive action for national security, the court said this power requires clear, direct evidence of a real threat. The majority opinion reaffirmed that Congress holds the fundamental power to regulate foreign commerce and levy taxes. Delegation of this power to the president cannot be so broad that Congress abdicates its constitutional role. The court placed new guardrails. Future tariffs must be justified with concrete evidence, not vague claims. The executive must follow a transparent process, with Congress able to review and block actions. The message was clear: the president cannot wage economic war unilaterally. This decision rebalanced power between the branches of government. It marked a pivotal moment in the debate over executive authority. The Supreme Court's decision didn't just reshape American law, it sent shockwaves through the global economy. Major U.S. trading partners, from the European Union to China and Canada, responded swiftly. European officials welcomed the ruling, calling it a step toward greater stability and predictability in global trade. In Beijing, government spokespeople noted the decision as a positive signal, but also stressed the need for continued vigilance and negotiation. Financial markets reacted with cautious optimism. Global stock indices ticked upward as investors anticipated fewer abrupt tariff hikes and a more rules-based approach from Washington. Some multinational companies began re-evaluating supply chains, hopeful that reduced trade tensions could lower costs and increase market certainty. Yet not all reactions were celebratory. Countries that had negotiated special deals under the threat of tariffs worried their hard-won concessions could unravel. Meanwhile, international trade organizations urged the U.S. to take the lead in strengthening multilateral agreements. As the dust settled, one thing was clear: the court's decision forced a reset in how nations interact with the world's largest economy. Allies and rivals alike began recalibrating their strategies, preparing for a new era, one where American trade policy would be shaped not just by presidential decree, but by a more balanced, transparent process. As the initial shockwaves faded, experts and policymakers began to consider the long-term consequences of the Supreme Court's landmark ruling. Would this decision mark a true turning point in how America engages with the world, or would future leaders find new ways to flex executive power? Legal scholars predict that the ruling will serve as a strong guardrail, permanently limiting the president's ability to unilaterally impose sweeping trade measures. This means fewer surprises for American businesses and trading partners alike. With Congress now firmly back in the driver's seat, trade policy is expected to become more transparent, deliberative, and possibly slower to change. Some analysts warn, however, that the new constraints could make it harder for the U.S. to respond quickly to emerging threats or unfair practices. Others argue that by forcing greater collaboration, the ruling could lead to more durable, broadly supported trade agreements, reducing the risk of abrupt policy swings with each new administration. Looking further ahead, the decision could inspire similar legal challenges in other areas where presidential authority has grown, potentially reshaping the balance of power in Washington for years to come. As lawmakers, businesses, and global partners adapt to this new reality, one thing is certain: the Supreme Court's ruling has set the stage for a more balanced, predictable, and collaborative era in American trade policy. The Supreme Court's decision dealt a major blow to Trump's trade legacy, dismantling the legal foundation of his America First tariffs. Future presidents will have far less latitude to impose tariffs without congressional approval. Any administration seeking to use tariffs must now work closely with Congress and provide rigorous justification. This restores significant power to Congress and forces a more collaborative approach to trade policy. Businesses that paid billions under the tariffs may now seek refunds, though the process will be complex. Internationally, the ruling empowers U.S. trading partners to renegotiate deals and demand more predictable agreements. Congress may also move to clarify trade laws and prevent future conflicts. This landmark case has redrawn the map for all future U.S. trade disputes.